How would Doorman work in Marvel Rivals? Don't click off, I promise. He's actually really cool. He's not just a knockoff of the symbiote suit Spider-Man. He's actually really tight. So Doorman is a member of the Great Lake Avengers, kind of a spin-off team of the Avengers team everybody knows and loves. People don't really take the Great Lake Avengers team too seriously. Again, for crying out, they got a teammate named Dinosaur on this one, man. I'm not gonna give you the full rundown on Great Lake Avengers, but pretty much Doorman's powers are exactly what they look like. He can function as a door for a very short distance, which wouldn't really have been too much to work off of, but he did have a little brush with death. Ended up coming back as the Grim Reaper, kind of the embodiment of that whole death thing in the Marvel universe, which is really weird, a weird angle to take this guy. There was another guy before him named Death Urge who kind of served the same master prior and was the Grim Reaper before. He got replaced, got stuffed into a squirrel. He's the Grim Reaper for squirrels now, and Doorman kind of replaced it. But either way, we're not going to get into that whole thing. In all honesty, though, Doorman is pretty strong in his newer form. He does have the ability to teleport, a little bit further. He doesn't have the ability to heal or anything. That's kind of something I workshop specifically in for Rivals, kind of like the whole Invisible Woman thing, how she can't heal, but it's something she can do since she's a support in the game. With that being said, though, I did give Doorman 325 HP, and he would function as a support slash off-tank hybrid. At least that's how I imagine people playing him. So with that being said, I do imagine him being about maybe 2-3 stars. I think you could definitely do some fancy things with him, especially because he can teleport and move people around, displace enemies, displace allies. And with that being said, he doesn't have the best showing of combat feats all the time in his Great Lake Avengers runs, and when he does show up, again, as the whole Harbinger of Death thing, kind of more of a like escort to the next realm kind of deal, doesn't really get involved in combat too often. So I did kind of struggle a little bit with making his moveset, but I feel like I did do something pretty good and did honor him pretty well with the moveset I gave him. So getting into it with his passive, it's called Death Sense on a 10-second cooldown. Doorman highlights allies on low HP for his teammates and himself, amplifying their healing received for 10 seconds. Once a teammate is highlighted and given the buff, the skill will go on cooldown. So this is a power that Doorman has, obviously after the brush with death thing. He can sense whenever somebody is in danger or about to die. Obviously that is part of his whole job description now. So this is just a fun little way to highlight that, kind of just incentivize people to prioritize the people who are lower on HP. And again, the way this would work is as soon as somebody hits low HP, it's going to highlight them first. If somebody gets on low HP right after them on your team, they unfortunately won't get that. They'll have to wait the 10 seconds for the cooldown to reset. So that way it's not busted. That way you don't just have the second everybody's on low HP, they get like a second little life, or they get a chance to restore themselves or get themselves back up to HP really quick. I feel like this is a pretty fun way, pretty good way to balance it out as well. Then for his primary fire, I gave him Shade Range. Doorman fires 3 projectiles made of Dark Force energy. The third projectile deals the most damage and slows enemies. Oh, also I forgot to add, he does also utilize the Dark Force, like Mr. Negative and like Cloak and Dagger as well, so he does have some sort of connection with them. Again, this guy, I feel like I am going to mention something new every time I get to this guy's abilities, but again, nothing too crazy, it's just the standard projectile here. Again, I feel like I wanted to give him a way to do damage as well. I feel like this would probably be about maybe medium to long range though. Then for his alt fire slash ability 1, I gave him Living Doorway on an 8-second cooldown. Doorman makes himself intangible for up to 10 seconds, now able to walk through walls on the map, but unable to contest points. Doorman can either target an ally or enemy within an immediate AoE, teleporting them a medium distance of his choosing. So I forgot to note it here, but Doorman would also teleport with them. He does kind of have to go with them. He can just send them a little bit of a distance away, but I do want to have Doorman go with them when he does this, since it is such a short cooldown, and since again, the obvious use I'm thinking of this is teleporting enemies off the map, and since it is an 8-second cooldown, I don't want people spamming that. So obviously that's the caveat. Doorman is going to go with whoever he teleports. That way you're not just teleporting people off the map the entire time. But again, this is kind of a really fun way to mitigate damage and also to support without directly healing. Then for ability 2, I gave him Dark Impact on a 15-second cooldown. Doorman utilizes his constructs to form 2 giant arms that can either be formed right in front of him or a medium distance away. If created further away, the arms will pull any enemies or allies caught in them towards Doorman, healing allies by 80 HP, damaging enemies by 40. If the construct is made directly in front of him, the hands will push forward, sending enemies away and dealing 50 damage to them, while giving allies a speed boost instead and amplifying their healing received for 5 seconds. So again, just another fun way to kind of support there. One of the things I kind of wanted to highlight with Doorman is I didn't want his main answer to always just be, oh, well, I'm just going to heal you. I wanted it to be something that either gives you a chance of escape, gives you a means of getting away. I did kind of want to highlight that whole impartial thing that a Grim Reaper should have. He doesn't really display this attitude too often, but again, I feel like when you're doing this stuff with games, you should balance it out. And again, just to break it down, the way this would work is you can either set it up further away away, it'll pull people close, do damage, or you can set up the hands directly in front of you, in which they'll push forward, sending enemies away, and then, you know, they'll give the allies the speed boost and everything, kind of just to dumb it down in case I didn't make it super clear in the description. Then for ability 3, it's called Not Your Time, on an 8-second cooldown. Doorman makes himself intangible for up to 10 seconds, now able to walk through walls on the map, but unable to contest points. Any projectiles that pass through him will be converted into a small amount of health for Doorman, and provide AoE healing within a small radius around him to any allies in the area. So I don't know how this would look if the bullets would directly travel through him, because this is kind of the main way he mitigates damage on his own. He'll kind of just phase himself, and the projectiles will just pass through him. They'll kind of just pass through him like he's an open door. But I didn't want to just have it so that he can make himself intangible, and then, you know, all your allies are going to get the damage that goes directly through him, because that would suck. So instead, I wanted to give him something that kind of could help with his healing a little bit more, since he doesn't really have a ton of ways to heal people directly without utilizing his skills. But this is, again, a really fun way to utilize that, and since it is only an 8-second cooldown, you are going to get a couple different opportunities to do it whenever you're not playing defense, whenever you're not trying to, you know, get to your teammates. And this does give him something else to do aside from the healing when he does get the opportunity to do it with his abilities. And then finally, for his ultimate, I gave him Oblivion Wave. Doorman calls on his predecessor, Death Urge, for some assistance with collecting souls. Large shaded hands erupt from the ground and try to catch enemies. If an enemy is caught, they will have their HP drained and provided to the nearest teammate of Doorman. Each grab drains 80 HP. So just kind of getting into that whole thing as far as the Death Urge, that is pretty much his predecessor, the guy who I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, who is trapped in the squirrel at this point. So I don't know if I'd have him come down, because his costume is very similar to Doorman's. He pretty much just doesn't have the eyes, but he was a lot more violent, was a lot more willing to throw hands very often, did make constructs that were weapons themselves, and Doorman really doesn't do that too often. So I feel like him bringing in that predecessor, kind of giving him maybe a little bit of his power just to utilize that for an ultimate, would be a good way to have a damage dealing ultimate, something that could kind of help your teammates as well, because yeah, these hands are going to be erupting out of the ground. I don't know how many exactly would erupt. I think it would probably go on for a couple seconds, and then, you know, the ultimate would end. But essentially, this is just a really fun way to give himself some HP, a really fun ultimate that you can utilize to kind of deny an area. And again, just a fun little reference to the previous person who was doing the job before him. With that being said, though, I don't know if I'd have Death Urge come in his squirrel form or in the actual form that he had prior. But again, I kind of want the squirrel form because, I feel like I mentioned something new every time I get to one of these skills. These guys fly around on skis. That's how they get around. Doorman, after his whole thing as the Grim Reaper, that's how he flies around. He gets skis. The Death Urge guy, too. Even in a little squirrel form, he flies around using the skis. So again, just comic ridiculousness. I think I'd want him as the squirrel. Maybe just kind of as a juxtaposition to Squirrel Girl. Maybe he could even have Death Urge hang around with him kind of on his shoulder in his, you know, default pose. Getting into the team-ups, though, I gave him one, and it's with Adam Warlock, and it's called Oblivion's Revival, and it's a passive. If Doorman's ultimate is used while his allies are at full HP, a fallen ally can be revived instead once 200 health is gained from enemies, and Adam Warlock's cooldowns are reduced by 30%. So might be a little bit strong in all honesty looking at it again, but I feel like it's a pretty good reward, again, for utilizing an ultimate that normally you'd want to use whenever you see allies or whenever you're like in the middle of a fight. Kind of an incentive to use the ultimate, not just in a fight like you normally would, kind of an incentive to utilize it in a more offensive kind of position. So maybe if you've already taken a fight and another team's coming back in, the Doorman can pop the ultimate, and then automatically if you get that damage, if you know your teammates hang back and their health is full, you get a teammate back. So it's like another Warlock revival, kind of just on standby. And I know that you'd have to use another ultimate to even get to it, but in all honesty, I don't think Doorman's ultimate would take too long to get to. But ultimately, I feel like this is a fun little team up there, kind of just a fun little play on the whole thing with Adam Warlock reviving people, and then Doorman being, you know, the Harbinger, the whole Grim Reaper thing. But aside from that, I couldn't think of any other team-ups. But who knows? If you guys have any other ideas on that, by all means, let me know. And finally, for the costumes, he doesn't really change costumes too much. There is a uncostumed version of him, DeMar Davis, that I really don't think would make it into the game. As for costumes he could have, I think a symbiote version of Doorman would be really funny, just because he wouldn't look any different. I at least wouldn't change his design. I'd maybe just make him a little bit slimier, kind of to show that he's been taken over by the symbiote, but I don't think you'd need to change too much for that, and I think people would like that. Another idea I had here is Thanos' groom. Thanos has a huge thing for death in the comics, and I think it would be really funny if Doorman played on that and was like, oh, well, you know, if you got a thing for death, I'm right here, and then he shows up in a suit, or maybe something along those lines. I don't think this has happened in the comics, to my knowledge, at least in anything I saw, but I think this would be a really fun excuse to have him dress up. Maybe you could also just do the standard, you know, Hellfire Gala version, have him dress up in a tux for that, but you need to pretty much give this guy reasons to dress up since he doesn't have any alternative costumes, or at least hasn't shown any off in the scans I've seen. And then finally, for the last costume, I actually have Death Urge, the normal version of him, which some people argue might be a downgrade because he's missing eyes, but I mean, again, at that point, Marvel Rivals, I know they'd cook for the design. They'd probably have some cool little pattern on it or something. I know they'd do something really cool for an actual Death Urge skin, since that is the character that takes the role a little bit more seriously and could have, you know, a lot more aggressive voice lines, could be a lot more aggressive towards other people, and I feel like that would be a fun interaction to have as well. But yeah, that is just my pitch on Doorman. Honestly, a really weird character. I love doing research into these guys, and then again, finding characters that might have slipped under my radar. I was familiar with Doorman prior, but I was not familiar with the status quo and what's going on with him currently. So by all means, if you guys want to see any other alternative characters, if you guys want to see anything else, by all means, leave it below in the comments. Otherwise, join me as we continue later in the week with Multiple Man, and then we're also going to be going over the Rivals rework with Rocket Raccoon, and then other episodes as well. Feel free to check out my YouTube. I'm going to be uploading daily from this point on. Videos not as edited as this one. It's more so stuff you can just listen to in the background while I rant on about, again, crazy stuff like Dinosaur on the Great Lake Avengers. But either way, I digress. If you guys got anything else, by all means, let me know in the comments. But otherwise, peace.